In the last session, we saw the last two sutras related to the object and the subject who is seeing the object. We also made a note of the point that if samadhi is to be experienced, on the way, one has to get into the state where the subject, the object, and the process of observation all are seen as one. It is one unitary movement. And in that one unitary movement, an experience of absence of the psychological I, and therefore non-identification with the psychological state of a personal nature that happens. This is what we saw in the last sutras. That even if a person is a wise man, if he is identified with his psychological state of specificity of the personality, the very identification does not allow him to lose himself and see the process as one, where the object, the subject, and the process of observation is seen as one unitary movement. From there, we will now move to Sutra number 72 onwards. 72 to 74, the three sutras have a strong philosophical implication to them. It goes beyond psychology and spirituality. It goes into philosophy. Sutra 72 says, the essential nature of the seen is only for the sake of awareness. Many interpretations are possible. One philosophic interpretation is that the nature of the subject and the nature of the object and the nature of process of observation is given what it is because that is the way the universe wants the play to happen and the journey of universe to happen. So the nature of the object, which is to overwhelm us and get us enticed and entangled with the object, is what it is, so that in the midst of it we can develop awareness and freedom from that overwhelming nature and the tempting nature of the object. This is a philosophical statement outside of spirituality and psychology. We are going into the nature of things, why the nature of things is what it is. This brings in an element of ontology and teleology into it. That origin of all that is the way it is because it is towards a purpose. And the broad structure towards that purpose of the journey is a design element of existence. Everything is not open to the outcomes of human will. There is an element of design in nature. 73 says, in the course of one's development, even if one becomes highly aware and stops being overwhelmed by the object or the process of observation, and one is liberated because one can lose oneself as a psychological self and get into a state of no thought, get into a state of freedom from objects and the process of observation, the compulsiveness of temptation and entanglement. Even if one becomes free from it, what happens then to the object? Because subjectively to the person who is free from it, the object may cease to exist as the person enters into a state of no thought. So in deeper states of no thought, the object ceases to exist for the person. But Patanjali says that does not mean the object ceases to exist objectively for everyone else who is not yet free from the object and the process of observation. So Patanjali here makes it clear that he does not take the position of extreme subjective idealism, that the object and the object world exists only as a condition of the mind. Patanjali accepts that there is an objective existence of objects independent of the subject. However, Patanjali is not Immanuel Kant, who says there is a subject and there is an object and the process of knowing. But the subject and object are not related to each other by a third entity which may have to do with the origin of both or purpose of both. So Patanjali here is more Hegelian. He says the subject and the object both are created and the process of observation is so created because the principle of existence has in mind a certain design for the journey of the individual and the universe. So Patanjali does believe in the Hegelian position that the subject and the object are not unrelated to each other in a process of a permanent alienation. He takes a Hegelian position that both are actually governed by a larger principle of existence and both are related. So the subject and object and the process of observation, all the three are a part of a larger existence in which each has a role to play towards a purpose. So with that, Patanjali also overcomes the alienation that Kant would bring in. 74. The notion of identity is the means of understanding the essential nature of the power of the owner and the owned. This needs some change. 74, 74 can be interpreted in two different ways. Somebody who is deep into Sanskrit can help us out. There are two kinds of interpretations here. One interpretation is not related to Sutra 75 and 76. It relates 74 to something in the first chapter. Sorry, the session before this. Some other sutra. And the second way to interpret 74 is to relate it to 75 and 76. One way to reconcile is this. This should serve the purpose. It will flow into a sequence. So 74 says, if you look at it positively, it says samyogaha. Samyogaha is union, oneness. And Swami Shakti Yoga. So our own power and the power of Swami, the Lord, which is nature. Swarup Upalabdhi Hetu. Swarup is to know the true form, the true essence. And that is the purpose of the yoga. So one way to interpret it is that this yoga or this oneness of the subject, object and the process of observation is to know the power of oneself, the power of nature, Purusha and Prakriti, and the true nature of oneself and the true nature of Prakriti. So this is a positive way of looking at it. The second way of looking at it is to say the samyoga as entanglement also. Because if we don't take this entanglement, then this subsequent two, they don't remain there. So one way to do is to look at it both as samyoga, as oneness, which helps us to understand. Let me say, if we take entanglement there, it is done. We don't have to put it here. Okay. It's fine now. So 74 says the oneness of the subject, object, and the process of observation enables oneself, the subject, to understand the essential nature and the power of what one is and what Prakriti is and what entanglement is. So you come to realize all the three. The subject, what it is, its true nature and power, object, its true nature and power, and the process of observation, overwhelming and entanglement, its nature and power. And thereby you get into the philosophy of existence. That the self has been put into existence to undergo certain experiences and then work to free himself from the entanglement with the objects and process of observation. And that is the design by existence, the principle of the universe. So once you experience the oneness of subject, object and process of observation, one realizes the essential nature and power of oneself, the object and the process of observation and the purpose behind all the three. And one also realizes, understands the entanglement of the subject with the object which is there. And then one realizes that ignorance is the cause of this entanglement. And once the ignorance goes away, and by that we mean you get into a state of no thought, you realize it is possible to be in a state of no thought, it is possible to be in a state of no effect, in a state of no object, and have that kind of freedom. And then the entanglement also disappears. And when this cessation of the entanglement is complete, one is left in a state of kaivalya. Kaivalya means only that pure consciousness, pure awareness remains. And that is the state of samadhi Patanjali wants us to reach. The way to unentangle oneself and achieve this cessation of compulsive activity of the mind is deployment of unceasing vision of discernment, viveka. So, ceaseless deployment of the sense of discernment that the object and the subject are different, and one can stand back and allow the object to appear in consciousness and fall down and be in a state of freedom. Realize it is not necessary to always have an object in the mind. It's not necessary to always be overwhelmed by the process of observation. When you use this ceaselessly, this faculty and this vision of discernment, cessation of the ceaseless activity of the mind happens. Patanjali in Sutra 78 talks about a 7-step process to reach the stage of true knowledge. We saw this is the second chapter, and in this second chapter, this is titled as Sadhana Path, the chapter of process, how to reach the stage of samadhi. And Patanjali here talks about a 7-step process. It actually is a 8-stage process. So the most popular way in which Patanjali is remembered is by his Ashtanga Yoga, the 8-stage process, which is sutra number 18. But the 8th stage is the stage of samadhi. You don't have to do it, it happens to you. But the 7 steps before the state of samadhi happens, they have to be done by you. So he says there is a 7-step process to reach the stage of true knowledge. And when the limbs of yoga, all these 7 steps are practiced, obstacles or impurities are destroyed, and radiant wisdom manifests itself, leading to the vision of discernment, you can simply call it, are practiced, obstacles are removed, purification happens, and one reaches the state of true knowledge. So he is now coming to the center of his book in terms of the description, how to reach the state of samadhi. And Patanjali is very open, very holistic, very appreciative of multiple paths. So even while he appreciates all other paths and is very eclectic, he brings forward his own path, a 8-stage process. And the 8 stages are yama, niyama, asana, pranayam, pratyahara, dharana, dhyan, and samadhi. First 7 steps you have to do, 8th step happens. So what is yama? Yama is inner rules that you apply to yourself. So you start with applying ethical rules inside of yourself. That is yama. So he will now elaborate each of these 8 points in subsequent sutras. So we will see yama means, he says, non-injury, non-violence, truthfulness, non-stealing, good conduct, and non-covetousness are the yamas. Divine conduct is brahmacharya. You can also include celibacy here. So one by one, Patanjali will now go into details of this 8-step process. The first step is yama. You apply ethical discipline to the internal world. Then second step is niyama. You apply ethical discipline to your behavioral external world. So this is a behavioral practice, niyama. Then comes the asana. Asana is physical postures of yoga, physical exercises that can help you on the process of enlightenment or samadhi. Then after doing the physical asanas, you go to pranayama, the breath work. After the breath work, you go into pratyahara, which is withdrawal of the senses inside and not to get entangled in too many activities in the external world. Then you have dharana, which is concentration or focus on any object. Usually it is an idol or a mantra, but on some people use om, but there is a concentration. Dharana. After the dharana, you get into dhyana. You get lost into this concentration. A new stage appears where you are completely lost into the object of concentration, which is dhyana. And after that, samadhi happens, the state of no thought, state of pure consciousness. At times, the psychic being, the experience of psychic being. At times, the experience of nirvana. At times, the experience of oceanic oneness. At times, the experience of stillness, stoic stillness. So he puts forward his own model of development from yam, niyam, asana, pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, dhyan, and samadhi. The eightfold model of yoga, Ashtanga yoga or Patanjali yoga. And this is a very powerful tool in the entire Hindu tradition. And a comprehensive tool that does not leave out any aspect of human life. And now he defines one by one what is yama, what is niyama. So he says yama is non-injury, non-violence, truthfulness, non-stealing, divine good conduct, celibacy, non-covetousness. These are yamas. And then he will go on to what is niyama, what is asana. He will detail out his 8-step process of yoga. So we have got into the center of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, where he delineates his own model of reaching the state of samadhi. The eightfold model, 7 steps you have to do. 8th step, if you do the 7 steps well, the 8th step happens, the stage of samadhi. So we'll continue to go into details of each of these 8 steps of Patanjali in the subsequent session.